A delight and a pleasure to be here, and big thanks to Elena and the whole team as well for organizing this. I have a question for you all, very quickly. How many of you believe that technology can change human behavior for good? All right, and you know the other question that's coming. How many of you believe that it can change human behavior for not so good? How many of you believe that that's a naive formulation and in fact technology always does both? That's what I want to suggest to you is the real case here. So for those of you who read the introduction in the program, we're diverting from that a little bit because in fact all of us agree that technology always has costs and benefits, and that a large part of the ethical challenge we're all facing is how to measure and compare the costs and the benefits so that we're dealing with net positives. So this is not going to be a dialogue between people saying, oh, it's for good, and other people saying, no, it's for bad. Just with that little correction, let me introduce my colleagues here. Starting at the far end, we have Ronnie Edry, who is probably known to most of you. How many of you saw Israel Loves Iran? Okay, for those of you who haven't seen that, there's a lovely TED Talk about that project. And we, in our lab, had the great privilege of doing a little bit of work with Ronnie on that. Beautiful work on using social technologies to increase positive engagement between different country populations at that point. Ronnie is also the founder of the Peace Factory and of the Sandbox, about which he'll be talking more a little bit about. And those are both also using technology to change human behavior. Valerie is Valerie Oliphant, projects manager at SimLab. How many of you know SimLab? How many of you are using SMS in some ways in your interventions? How many of you have used frontline SMS? You should be thanking SimLab. Ken Banks and the team there are the people that have developed that very powerful technology. I'll have more questions for you about that later. Mukhtar Hersi Mohammed from Somalia. Mukhtar is the head of the audiovisual unit of the Puntland Development Research Center. So my question for all of you out there is, how many of you are using video in some way in your interventions? How many of you are using video in some key way in your intervention rather than just reporting to your donors? Mukhtar will be talking a little bit about how he has developed over the last 11 years, actually, very, very interesting approaches for using technology not to change so much individual behavior, but to change government behavior. And so we'll come back to that distinction as well a little bit in the future. Okay, so we're going to fly through a couple of things here. I'm just going to set this up a little bit. I'd like to start with a thought experiment. I want you all to imagine that 6 years ago, all the gods of all the religions on this planet all came to you and said, you are authorized to write one more commandment in all the religions that says, whatever you have to say to get people to be hospitable enough that they will allow strangers from other countries to stay in their homes. And I want you to think about how hard a challenge that would have been. First of all, for you to get all the people to believe that gods had actually spoken to you, and then, if you've ever worked in any religious organization, getting people to do what they know they should do, even when they do believe that God has spoken to you. I want you to think about how long that would take, and I want you to think about how much it would cost. And I think we can all agree that religions are very powerful technologies for changing behavior. They work on code, they work on religious code. That religious code is written more or less like every other kind of code. The thing is, they take a long time to run that code. You would be lucky to see the results of your experiment in 1 or 2 generations. So now, having failed at that, I'd like you to imagine that all the presidents and prime ministers of the world come to you and say, you are authorized to write one more piece of legal code to try and achieve the same purpose. Get people to be hospitable enough that they will let strangers from other countries stay in their home. And based on the last time that we tried to change human behavior with legal code at any large scale, and I want to suggest to you that getting people to wear seatbelts is one of the last examples we have of that. We can say, okay, it won't take you a couple of generations, but it will probably take you a couple of decades, and it will cost society a whole lot of money to do that. And you'll be very frustrated along the way, because you'll spend 80% of your time searching for that money so that you can carry on your work getting people to, in this case, be hospitable. Here's the big change in technology. Now I want you to imagine that somebody, any random person, came to you 6 years ago and said, hey, do you think you could write some software? Do you think you could write an app to get strangers to be hospitable and let other strangers stay from other countries to stay in their homes? And you all know the answer to that, right? In 6 years, you not only could have done that, we have existence proofs, many of them, not just one, but the biggest one, you could have made yourself $14 billion in the process. I'm talking about Airbnb, of course, as one example that you should be thinking of as the largest citizen diplomacy project in the world. And they have data for every single episode of engagement between every single person who has ever stayed in the home of any other person. And because most of those people are signed up on Facebook, they have all sorts of group affiliation data as well, so they can see when an Israeli stayed with a Palestinian, when women stay with men stay with women, people from this religion stay with that religion, et cetera, across all sorts of different group boundaries. That's the big change that we are all facing. Technology is suddenly enabling us to rewrite human behavior in software code at a scale and a speed that has never been possible before. How many of you think that's awesome? How many of you think that's terrifying? Why isn't everybody raising their hands for both? Because it's both. If there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this panel, please get away from the naive thinking of is technology good or is technology bad, and start thinking it's always both. It always has costs. And unfortunately, there's two kinds of bad. There's intentional, deliberate misuses, and we see in all the peace technologies we're aware of, there's the possibility for reverse targeting, for deliberate misuse of transparency, and so on. Some of us have had firsthand experiences with those kind of things going wrong. But there's very strange bad news about our species, where we actually do the most physical, violent harm to each other by far is in entirely unintended places. We kill and maim more of each other in traffic every day than in all the wars and conflict and violent crime and terrorism combined. And if that's any indication of how these things usually work with technology, then we should expect that there will be unintended consequences that come with these otherwise very powerful, very good peace technologies that will be just as destructive. Okay, so that's the setup for what we're talking about here. What's going on is technology now allows us to measure human social behavior at a speed and precision and resolution that we've never been able to do before. In Silicon Valley, we have an algorithm. Basically says if you can measure something, insert a few other things in the process, but if you can measure something, you can begin to design for something. If you can begin to design for something, you can monetize it. What that means, the implication is, we suddenly have the possibilities of for-profit peace technologies. Sheldon, at some point, will talk in more depth about that from USIP as well, and with his project that he's trying to get off the ground with launching new for-profit peace technology businesses. What that means, my next question for all of you is, how many of you are structured as a nonprofit? How many of you see Airbnb as a competitor to what you're doing? I want to suggest to you that you better start thinking about that, because they've got $14 billion of funding that you probably will never be able to get your hands on from any funding source. You might need to think very seriously about restructuring how your project operates, because the world is changing like that. Okay, with those provocations in place, I'm going to start with Ronnie at the end.
I'm so sorry.
Yep.
Sorry for the interruption. We are having a problem with the Wi-Fi network because a few of you are possibly downloading something, we think. So we can ask you to please not use the network to download anything. Use it to browse, use it to tweet, but please try not to download anything. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks, Elena. That's the playoffs? Who's winning? No, I won't ask. With that setup and that provocation, I want to start with a question for Ronnie. Actually, first of all, a quick question for the audience about what Ronnie's doing. How many of you are trying to do both social innovation and technology innovation? How many of you are discovering how hard that is? So, quick strategy suggestion. One of the reasons that we have Ronnie here, and we're so glad to have him here, is it's very hard to do both. And if you're trying to do, it's very hard to do either one. If you're trying to do both, your chances of failure go up by several orders of magnitude. Part of what Ronnie has done that is brilliant is focused on using existing technology to accomplish what he's accomplished. And my first question for you, Ronnie, is how do you choose what kind of existing technology to use?
Sorry. We're using, I'm Ronnie, I'm from Israel, and I'm running the Peace Factory, just so people know. We're using what we can use. And we're not trying, I mean, we do try once to create an app, and then I get that it was so complicated. And so, I mean, we did do the app, but in the process we lost views of what we wanted to do. So at the end of the day, we're just using what we can do, what we can use, like Facebook, Twitter, this kind of platform, social media, and we're trying to get it the most simpler we can get. So we always like keep it simple, keep it simple. The more simple it works, and the most people we have online. I can give you one example of one project we did on Facebook. We've created a lot of connection between Iranians and Israeli on Facebook just by showing their faces. We asked them, send us an image, we'll make a poster of it, and we will repost the image with your name on it. And it went like really viral. You can ask Mark, he has access to the data of the page. It's by millions of weekly viewers, and it works really, really fine. Once we want to try, because how Facebook is working, most of the time it will help you to find friends that are already your friends. I mean, it will say, hey, you're sitting next to Mark, maybe he's your friend, so friend him. And you end up with a world on Facebook that is only full by your friends. People you work with, people you know of, but you will never see an Israeli having friends from Lebanon, from Palestine, from Iran, from Egypt, because they're not supposed to be friends and they have no relative. So nobody's asking you on Facebook, if you're an Israeli, to be friends with someone from Lebanon. So what we've done is we ask people who want to try it and say, let's say you're from Iran and you want to have friends with Israeli. Send us just the word friend me on Facebook. So people will come to the page. We have few pages. Israel loves Iran, Peace Factory, Palestine loves Israel. You just can look it online on Facebook. People will type on the page, friend me. So now we have a link to his profile. So we're going to his profile, we're taking the best selfie he has, and we're making a poster with that guy and that logo, friend me. And we're reposting this image with a link to his page. And people from Israel now see this guy from Iran smiling and say, friend me. So they will go to his page and they will friend him. And it's really easy. I mean, it's stupid how easy it is. And people are friending each other. And I have now mutual friends, like with Iranians, with Palestinians, with all over the Middle East. And that's how easy it works without developing any technology, of course.
One of the things, so how many of you think hacktivism in terms of clicking and friending somebody, not so interesting? One of the things that was very interesting for us was when we saw the transition as people shifted from the online behaviors to, at some point, somebody saying, hey, I'm going to be in Berlin next week, is anybody going to be there? And somebody else from Iran saying, actually, yes, I'm going to be there, and let's meet for coffee. And then they took photos and posted those photos back. And so we started seeing this transition from online, entirely online virtual behaviors to offline real-world behaviors. And that also got powerful quickly. Talk a little bit about that.
That's not only that. That's also the fact that you have now a friend. I mean, imagine people growing up in Israel, in Palestine. I mean, just talking about this conflict. People are like sitting like 10 kilometers from each other and never have saw the face of each other. They literally don't know each other, but living in the same place, like the size of this island. So the first step is like, friend me. Be my friend on Facebook. And from that place, you can now see what is he doing here and there. I mean, it's not being really his friend, but it's starting from somewhere that you can being his friend. Because you see when he has a birthday. You see the birth of his first child. You see his kitchen. You see what he's cooking. You see the selfie of the food. And at some point, you get to a moment that he's doing something you really like, because he's also a fan of, I don't know, it's the playoffs, so he's a Cleveland fan. So you're also a Cleveland fan. So now you're talking with him. And now, slowly, slowly, you become his friend. And at some point, you will invite him to your house. That's how I met Juju from Palestine. She's actually living in Germany now, but she's the one who opened the page called Palestine of Israel. We never met. We met online. And she's a Palestinian. And at some point, after like almost 2 years of talking online, she decided, because she has a German passport, she decided to come to Israel, not to Palestine, not to visit her friends in Ramallah and Jenin, but to come to Israel to visit me. And she was my actual guest in my house for like a few days. She's her third trip now.
So, Ronnie, one of the things that you've done that is really brilliant, not only using existing technology platforms where Facebook has spent the billions of dollars to get people to use the technology on your behalf and convened the users as well. Facebook has also spent billions of dollars building the analytics engine so that you can run the metrics on the back, see the data, and make strategic decisions based on that data. Can you give just a couple of examples of how you've used the data to tweak what you're doing?
Yeah, that's amazing. The tools you have on Facebook, when you're running a page, they're really giving you, like, sometimes I'm like, these guys are crazy. They're giving me this for free? Really? It's too much. Thank you. Because we're running a lot of projects, and sometimes you can just see what works and what don't work. We tried a few weeks ago to post like 4 pictures at once of one person, like a picture of his face, a picture of his kitchen, school picture, and a picture of his parents. And on each of what picture, we have a short story. And we wanted people to get into this post and say, okay, it's like a short magazine. Just go through the pictures. And they're not going. So we have to reshape that and make those 4 pictures a 1 picture with 1 text. And these ones are working. So that's how you know if what you do is working or you're just wasting your time, because nobody wants to look at it or to click it or to share it.
How quickly did you see that it wasn't working?
A matter of days.
Yeah. So it saved you a lot of time and energy and a lot of money as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly, that's part of the beauty here.
But you have to be, you have to be honest. You have to be honest that if it's not going viral, if it's not going like big, like thousands of shares, hundreds of likes, something is not working. Exactly. Which is okay.
Better to know now than later, yeah. So, last question for you, Ronnie. A key element of what you've done is using visual graphics and so on. It's not just a text-based intervention. You're sending people photos in Facebook that are effectively somewhere between a postcard and a poster. How important is that visual aspect to what you're doing?
I mean, I'm a graphic designer, so for me it's all about images. When you see a picture of someone that lives in Iraq and you see his face and he's smiling and the pictures look good, you will want to read what he's saying. And when you don't see his face, and I can tell you like the difference of seeing the eyes of someone on Facebook and not seeing the eyes. And when you see the eyes, you have like a big reach of people looking at it. And when it's bad design, it's not working. And when you have bad pictures, so we're always fighting for getting the best picture of people we can have, because we know that that's the kind of picture that will work. So it's all about images, to me.
When you've compared it with text only, I think we see that absolutely the images are a key part of it. Ronnie, thank you very much.
No problem.
Would you pass that microphone to Valerie? Thank you. So, how many of you are working in areas where SMS and radio is the only technology you have available? How many of you are focused on really bottom of the pyramid interventions where you're, even if you're in a high-tech area, the people, or in a city that has lots of high-tech infrastructure, the people you're trying to reach don't have access to that infrastructure, or they have just very basic feature phones? All right. So, along with those sort of two choices of either doing social innovation or technology innovation, but trying not to do both, otherwise your chances of failure go up highly. You also have a similar kind of a choice between focusing on bottom of the pyramid, basic technology infrastructure, where you can reach a lot of people, or looking into the future as we see penetration for the smarter kinds of technology growing like crazy, and trying to prepare and position interventions for the future. Strongly suggest that strategically you do one or the other again. Don't try and do both, because if you try and do both, your chances of failure go up astronomically again. So the team at SimLab have been really focused on that bottom of the pyramid market and making that basic fundamental technology available to as many people as possible. Valerie, you are a project manager there at SimLab, and you're running several different projects around the world. Tell us a little bit about some of those projects and specifically how you're doing behavior change there.
Sure. So like Mark said, we focus on really low-end technology, and if you're not using SMS in your projects right now, I would like to question why. And I think as peace builders, one of our, as Helena said, one of our goals should be to really focus on making peace an inclusive process, and we're not just looking for a small elite group. And so if you're using higher end technologies, that's great, and there's a lot of potential there. But if you also incorporate some of those lower end technologies, you'll reach a much broader population. And SMS is a really great way to do that. Radio is also fantastic. So by combining sort of higher end and lower end technologies, you can really reach a much broader population. So at SimLab, I focus on our governance projects, and so I'm running several things. But I'll actually talk about a past project that I worked on before I came to SimLab. I was actually a user on the other end. I worked in Nigeria with Search for Common Ground, which is a large conflict resolution nonprofit. And so we were developing an early warning system in northern Nigeria. And then also I worked on a radio project in the southeastern region in Port Harcourt. And so through both those projects, I found Frontline SMS, which is how I came to work at SimLab. And the goal here was to combat rumors that were sort of inflammatory in the north. And so it was affecting behavior in both a negative and a positive way. So the negative behavior change was to report how how these rumors were being spread, and then to combat them and sort of dispel them for people. And then we would also send out these SMS blasts that were peace messages and encouraging them to submit reports and to exhibit peaceful behaviors, which at the time I found sort of cheesy, but were actually very impactful. And when we did an evaluation, people loved them. And I think the most important part of that was that it was a daily reminder to them about how they could affect peace in their community, and people really, really responded well to that.
So you made a really important distinction between positive peace behaviors and negative peace behaviors. How many of you who are designing behavior interventions have made that distinction? So how many of you, there was hardly any hands at all, so I'm just going to give a quick description. Negative peace behaviors are getting people to be less bad to each other in some way or other. So it's in the domain, Galtung's domain of negative peace, which is all about how do we get people to be less bad. So negative peace behaviors, you're talking about reducing violent and negative behavior. Positive peace behaviors, you're getting people to be more good to each other in some way or other. Now that I've explained it a little bit, how many of you are working with negative peace behaviors in your intervention? Okay, very few. That's interesting. How many of you are focused on positive peace behaviors? Also very few. What are the rest of you doing? So strategically, again here, and we're trying to give you pointers based on the successes and the failures of all these organizations up here, ours included. The challenges that you face is that the psychologies are completely different. And the psychology of getting people to stop doing anything at all is much, much harder. Much, much, much harder. So if you want to rethink your strategy, if you're having trouble getting traction, the psychology of getting people to do something instead of to stop doing something, turns out it's much easier to do that. And so even if what you need to do is stop people doing something, try and find some replacement behavior and focus on getting people to do that replacement behavior instead. It will increase your chances of success significantly. So you're dealing with both behaviors, Valerie. Give an example of each.
Sure. So an example of positive behavior change would be, let's see, it's not peace building oriented, but in Papua New Guinea, the way that the geography works there, it's very difficult to get from one city to the next. So there's a lack of educational materials and textbooks that they have, and it's very difficult to get them to different cities. So using frontline SMS, people in the main city there are able to send an SMS textbook, and so they send one text message, it's a little story, and it builds on itself each day. So they get a text message with the story, and then they get a second text message with reading comprehension questions. And the teacher gets these, and they are able to write them out on their blackboards and teach their students English literacy. And again, the most important thing that we found through these is that the daily reminder to do these things is what really encourages the teachers to focus on literacy within their schools. And so that's kind of working at a positive behavior change instead of reprimanding teachers for teacher absenteeism. It's encouraging them to attend school and teach their children. So that's an example of positive change. Negative change, or focusing on more of the negative piece, would be a lot of people like to use SMS for accountability and transparency. So holding governments accountable for either providing services or goods, whether that's fixing potholes, whether that's electoral monitoring. So people can use SMS. Often they'll pair it with Ushahidi, so frontline SMS Ushahidi, and then they'll map it out, and they'll show where governments aren't responding in the way that they're supposed to. And so that's hoping that via that advocacy, the government will be encouraged to change their behavior and then address those things. So.
Great, thank you very much. I'll ask you to pass the microphone on.
Thank you.
And Mukhtar, tell us a little bit about using video and using video technology, particularly both in the production and the distribution, how you're using it.
Okay, and I come from Somalia, particularly northeast Somalia, where we have regional administration. I gather almost everybody here knows that Somalia is still in post-conflict period. And we had, since 1998, this regional government and different successive administrations exchanged office. And we are peace builders. My institution, based in Garowe, the capital of Puntland, works particularly in peace building. So I am a documentary filmmaker, but I'm at the same time a peace builder. I don't work like the media, because, you know, unlike the media, we have to be very careful what we are communicating to people. We are creating a space for dialogue and reconciliation, and trying to give peace a better chance to reduce conflicts. That way, I consider myself as a peace builder. And in Puntland, we had, and 2 times we had constitutional rooted conflicts. So, based on our experience, I come from a place where there's not, the government doesn't have public radio, there's no public TV, there's no public newspaper. So it's a unique environment. It's an environment that does not allow the government to communicate properly with the public, nor the public communicate back with the government. So we learned that because of this gap, we had to create an opportunity for people to communicate with the government, reach out to the government, let the government know what they want, particularly when it comes to democracy. And having a democratic, we say in where I come from, we don't differentiate between peace building and state building. Because once you have a state, you are more likely to have peace. But if you don't have a state, you will surely have no peace. So that way, with that perspective, we try to create opportunities for the people to have a voice, to let the government know what the people want. So we had 2 times problem, as I said, related to the Constitution. And there's a specific project now we are doing, which engages. It's a human-driven, but it engages a number of technological tools, and we try to make a polling survey, and in which almost 1,000 people participated, and the result is taken to is presented in front of the government. The people want a democratic system. The people want, because it happens in many times in the past that each administration somehow uses a kind of delay tactic, that the democratization process is given a priority in the last year of the government term. So that way, because of that, there's always a failure. So people now want the government to give a democratization process a priority, and they want the government to start the democratization process within the first year in office.
So part of your challenge then is that you're trying to change 2 kinds of behavior. You're trying to change citizen democratic behavior, and you're trying to change government behavior.
Exactly.
And so how are you using film to do that?
We are using not only a film. We have in place a very active group we call Mobile AV Unit, which, because in where I come from, literacy is very high. Some of people have never seen a film, or it's a very new experience to them, and there's a less chance for people to actually share information. So we are using different kinds of tools. One being the mobile AV unit, the other one being employing web-based platforms to analyze and present the data. We engage members of parliament, members, cabinet members, and in workshops, as groups, and also as individuals, in order to change their behavior, their way of thinking, and also to present to them what the people want. This is what the people want. So if you do that, you you foster an environment for peace to grow, and you also reduce the possibility of conflict.
And so not only do you have sort of two internal markets, you're dealing with both citizens trying to get them to do more democratic behavior, and then government trying to be more responsive to that democratic behavior, but you also have an internal audience within Somalia, those two that I described. Then you have an external audience, which is the Somali diaspora.
Exactly.
And so for them, you're using mainly the YouTube and the web-based tools and so on to reach out.
Exactly. We're using the YouTube, we're using Facebook, and technology for us is just been the past 5 years. We like 8 years, it was really difficult to get internet in Puntland. But times are changing, and it's still new, but we feel that with the use of technology, we are able to reach out more and also engage more people from the diaspora. We call diaspora, Somali diaspora. So little by little, our experience, our ability is also expanding. And we have the hope that in the future, we will be able to create a space where the Somali diaspora living all around the world can directly participate in our projects and programs, whether they are forums, whether they are workshops, they are, whether they are whatever. So yes, I can say that we are very much committed to technology, and we are realizing that with technology we will be able to actually make more impact.
So I want you all to notice also that there's a stack of behaviors involved here. In order to get the higher level behaviors of large-scale social change from people who are watching the kind of documentaries, whether they're government ministers or members of the population where you've literally driven out to their community and set up a movie for them to watch in their community. In either case, in order to get those high-level changes, you need this underlying stack of foundational, very basic behaviors that you can then chain together into more complex behaviors. And so for that Somali diaspora, for example, in order for them to be responsive as an audience to you and also as a supporting community to you, you need them to actually watch the videos. And the technology for online video actually gives you that capability to see, are people watching or not? Is this message getting out or not? Is it reaching the audience I intended it to, or is it reaching some other audience? How are you using things like Google Analytics on YouTube to be able to track and hone your strategy to do that?
Actually, we've just been feeding our films to YouTube. We don't have much experience yet on the how we can very effectively, what do you say, make best use of YouTube. But let me say that locally, it's not only, when you have communities divided communities, the first thing to do is to create dialogue. So we are more focused internally than externally. So this technology that we employ creates an opportunity to break the silence, to create opportunity for dialogue across communities. I think that we should have spent a lot more effort in engaging people from the external, but we are more focused internally now. Because of the existing circumstances are more pressing internally, that's why we are focusing more.
Makes sense. How many of you are using video again as a core part of your intervention? How many of you are using online video, web video? How many of you are using the very powerful analytics tools, Google Analytics and others, to actually track the impact of? All right. So one of the things I'd like to ask you to do is talk to Mukhtar afterwards and just brainstorm a little bit together about what strategies you're discovering that are working, how you're able to tweak your strategy, how quickly and how cheaply you're able to do it as a result of having those analytics. I want to put this in perspective for you all. How many of you remember the PRISM scandal of a couple of years ago, the NSA reading everybody's email and so on? Yeah? How many of you know how much money the US government spent building PRISM? Roughly $22 million. How many of you have ever used government contractor-built software? Can anybody say something about what that user experience was like? Yeah, he says sarcastically, charming, yes, okay. So what I want you to see in perspective here is that both Google and Facebook and several other great tool makers out there spend hundreds of millions to billions of dollars every year to build very powerful analytics tools that you can use for free. And you can be almost certain that they are at least as powerful as anything the NSA has, and they cost you nothing. Take advantage of them. They really, really help you hone your technology strategy to get the very precise behavior change that you're looking for. And like we said, when you're using video especially, for example, one of the things you can do is you can see exactly when people stop watching your video. And so if they're consistently dropping out 1 minute and 29 seconds in, you probably need to change something in your video at that point to make sure that your message is getting through. Very simple, very basic things like that can make all the difference in whether somebody gets all the way through your conversion funnel down to where you need them to be in terms of the behavior change you want. All right, I think at this point, we're going to open up for questions and answers for everybody. I hope that gave you the quick, broad overview of different ways you can use different kinds of technology to elicit behavior change, and I hope you're all aware that we can do it at a scale again that's never been possible before. Is somebody running mic for me to the audience? Okay, let's start here. Somebody, Mike? Okay. And I'm going to ask you all, please very quickly introduce yourselves and say what organization you're with as well.
Oh, my name is Ataul from Pakistan. I have two questions, one from this and one from this guy. In Facebook, Pakistan, about 30 million people using Facebook, 16 hours out of 24 hours. So, but unfortunately, Pakistan is in very initial stage using technology for peace or for rights, for several other good things. So, how I can blog or how I can reach to 30 million Pakistani people, they are using Facebook to post my piece or to utilize that, that tool for peace building. And second, Pakistan, I think Pakistan is one of the top countries in the world that the people using SMS and texts very usually and commonly. And also the mobile companies giving a lot of cheapest packages. In only 84 Pakistani rupees, they are giving a 10,000 SMS package. So how we can use the SMS for the peace building and what software or what technology we need to properly utilize it to convince our message to these 30 million people they are using, or more than or maybe less than, they are using mobile and Facebook.
So, Ronnie, do you want to take the first one, and then Valerie, do you want to talk about what you're actually doing in Pakistan?
Yeah, about using Facebook and Instagram and social media and trying to push message of peace. You have to remember when you're using social media, then people don't want to read advertisements. They don't care about what you have to say. They just want something nice. You have to remember that guy in the line in Starbucks in the morning doing that. And you have to be one of those few moments when he stops and say, oh, that's nice. And he will like it. So first of all, you have to open a page or, I don't know, a group, whatever you like. But you have to focus on saying something that interests people. And not just say, peace, because it's not working. Kids are working, boobs, but on Facebook it's not, so Tumblr is good. Share stories. Stories of people, always working. Pictures.
Great. And how you can use SMS for peace building. So, and if anyone is interested, feel free to come hunt me down at some point. We're running an online course through UNDEF right now that focuses on how you can use Frontline SMS and Frontline Cloud in governance and peace building related projects. So if you're interested, grab my card or something. I'm more than happy to shoot you an email, and it's an online course, so you can do it from wherever you're at. And it's geared for really low-end technology-enabled countries. So if you're in some place that isn't super well connected, still reach out. But how Frontline SMS and Frontline Cloud work, which Frontline Cloud is a cloud-hosted version that requires the internet. Frontline SMS is just a software you download to your desktop. It runs without the internet. Over a mobile connection, so you connect it to a modem and a SIM card. You can use that to then send out mass SMS, not spam, but to people that you know, which is an important distinction. You don't want to be spamming random people with your SMS because they'll just get irritated.
You don't elicit positive behavior change with spam.
But so through the software, you can manage SMS, you can send polls, you can send reminders for appointments. So you can build recipes within the software that if someone sends a text message asking a certain question, it then, when it picks up certain keywords, automatically sends a variety of responses. And so I'm happy to tell you more about that if you want to approach me afterwards.
Where to start? Let's work our way backwards. Your name and organization, please.
Thank you. Okay. My name is Aya, and I'm from Tunisia. I was actually wondering about the Friend Me page. Did it create some kind of hate speech and conflict? And unintentionally, we're having this confrontation, like having people that dialogue from the Middle East? And if so, how did you deal with it? Did you censor it, or did you let the conversation flow?
That depends on obviously we have a lot of bad stuff happening on those pages. But the main issue is that people are talking. So long it's constructive. I mean, we have Palestinian coming and talking about Israeli, talking about settlement and whatever. I mean, it's a place to raise ideas and to open dialogues. Sometimes you have people coming to the page just to bash it, just to try to make you close it. We had it when it just opened, and I don't know if you remember that time, but for like days, we had people coming to the page posting pictures of their children, like by the hundreds. So we had to decide if we're keeping the page open, but do something about it, or close the page so people can't post those images. And we had a lot of people come in, friends of mine give their time, and they were deleting one by one all the comments. So they had to go over the page and one by one deleting all the comments. So that comes, I mean, the moment you have a page and people coming to say bad stuff, that means you're on the right path.
Yeah, the first challenge is to get engagement. The second challenge, once you've got engagement, is to try and get positive engagement. But, yeah.
You have a guy over the mic. You should get the microphone.
So that's actually a perfect segue for my question. I'm Marianne Perez de Francis with a Peace Superheroes digital game. And on this panel, you've been talking a lot about quantity, that technology allows us to scale up, that using Facebook and SMS and video, we can reach masses of people. How do we use that technology also to generate quality? And how do we use it to, and how do you measure the quality as opposed to just quantity?
No, it's a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't emphasize this more. In our engagement framework that we use as a basic peace metric, we're always looking at quantity on the horizontal and quality on the vertical. And there again, you should probably be looking at a strategy where you're mainly focused on one or the other. But they both have potential harms if you emphasize only one or only the other. If you focus entirely on getting more quantity, at some point you risk becoming an irritant. And the metaphor there is, if you come home at the end of the day and your little child runs up to you and says, "Mommy, Mommy, I'm so happy to see you," you feel good, that's very nice. If the same little child comes running to you every 10 seconds and says, "Mommy, Mommy," after a while it becomes an irritant. So the same positive behavior, if there's too much of it, becomes an irritant.
But
and
let me try to answer also this one, because it's, I mean, for me it's really easy to see when we're having an impact, like quality impact, because I can go through my personal page, not the Israel loves Iran, but my Ronnie Edry like user, and go to a friend of mine in Iran and see how many Israeli friends he have now, and ask him who is he talking to, and see if he has a picture of him meeting him in Germany. And when that happened, because you opened a page like 2 years ago, you know that you're doing something that really works. And I can give you, I can show you after I have my computer here, come to me, and I can give you like so much example of that happening. People who met over those big page and become friends and get it to the real life, and now they're like really talking all the time.
right. So this is the basis of the increasing quality of engagement is start with tiny little things, and then you step those behaviors up over time, and that allows you to balance out quality and quantity. If you get too much quality too fast, you risk people having a large sense of betrayal because they haven't had a chance to really calibrate with each other. And so they feel like they had a very good experience, now this person understands me, now they know me, and then you have a little misunderstanding and it feels like a very big deal because you've increased quality too fast. So you want to find that fine line in the middle, and you want to start small, as Ronnie said, and better to start with virtual experiences in a safe environment, like you're doing in a game context, and then step your way slowly up towards the higher quality behaviors. Please. I see you in the back, and we will get to you.
I was wondering if you could speak about the role of trust and where the information source is in the success or not success of the engagement campaigns. And so, for instance, this might be most relevant to you, Valerie. If you've seen projects where the information is just kind of sent out from a random number, and if that leads to a success or failure, as opposed to kind of like leading it through a trusted source from the community.
Yeah, of course. So I think there's two things for this. So for trust, I think with any technology that you use, it should really be using and building on relationships that already exist. So when I talked about not sending spam messages, you don't want to just be mass SMSing numbers of people that you don't have a previously existing relationship with. So technology should be sort of a complement to the program that you're already doing. And hopefully you already have a personal relationship with those people that you're using the technology to reach, at least in terms of communication. And then on the other side, For example, when I was talking about the project in Nigeria, we also wanted to have trusted information coming into the system. And so you want to have methods of verifying the information and the data that you're collecting. And one way that we did that, we used a bounded crowdsource method. And so we had trusted people that we had in the communities that were submitting text messages. So again, we had a relationship with the people that would be sending in SMS reports, and it wasn't just a mass collection of information from people that we didn't trust or know.
I think we have, do we have 4 microphones or only, how many do we have in the audience? 1, 2, okay. Okay, you have a microphone now, great. So,
yes, sir, thank you very much, sir. Getting a chance after a long struggle, you see, so thank you. Take care of the backbencher also sometime. I'm also from Pakistan, from the northern part, based in Peshawar, working in Pakistan and Afghanistan both. One question was about the Facebook. From the last 1 year, I started non-violence on my Facebook. I started from the non-violence leader, which was in my part. I started the struggle before Martin Luther King and Gandhi. Bacha Khan is his name. And he was very famous for the servant of God. So, and then later on, I include everyone. So I am getting a very good feedback even from Israel, because I don't like the religiously or politically, whatever is I get good quotation on non-violence, I gave it, and I have a lot of friends now on the non-violence. This is just feedback, not question. Second is from the Somalia friend. I am writing also on a true story TV plays, and that has such a good impact on the community, because everyone, when they look it, I just get a true story, dramatized it, and then gave it to the TV, and that has a very good impact on the community when the people really, which is touching inside. Otherwise, the TV or other documentary, it is above the mind and the heart and mind, but whatever is the true story, it really relates to the people inside there. So this is just my 2 comments for my friend.
Okay, I'm gonna ask if we stick to questions, please, for the panelists. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Matt Levinsure. I find all of these projects extremely impressive in the sense of generating more empathetic relationships or more empathetic attitudes across group lines. I guess my question concerns how one moves from generating more empathy, the capacity to visit one another in Berlin, the capacity to, post positive pictures of people on your Facebook account and have higher familiarity with the other group, to fundamental behavior change. I think that when we speak about alternative infrastructures for peace, we're talking about moving from the personal level to a more institutional level. And so I'm wondering in what sense any or all of these projects have more sustained impact at the institutional level.
In my personal experience, I can tell you that I got approached by a few politicians in Israel when we started the project, because they were feeling that something was happening, and I think it's a game of a long run. You're making small changes, but you start somewhere, and you get people to understand that there is even a political game here. So politicians, they understand just what they can gain for it. So you're proving them that by talking, you can get them to gain something, and at some point, I think they will come. I talked with few of them. I have to say that some of them were like, oh my God, what are you doing? But some were open, and especially, I gave few talks in a lot of places, and one of the most interesting for you maybe that I was one asked to talk in a really secret place in Israel. I can't say any more than that, but it was like I was surprised that they were asking me to come to talk about Iran because I was sure they know way more than me. And in fact, they really want to know what's this thing happening on Facebook with Israeli and Iranian talking now? What are we doing here? And they were really like, they wanted to know. And I think that's, that gets you to understand that they're really, it's changing also their way of looking at it, where people are talking. So it's a long game, but it's working.
There's also just the raw metrics that you see in the data. When you start seeing millions and millions of comments, for example, or likes and so on, politicians begin to pay attention. Causation is really, really difficult to show in these sort of in the wild things, but there were pretty consistent predictions prior to both the Israeli and Iranian elections that things were going to go more hardline and more militant on both sides. And in fact, after you launched, to a lot of people's surprise, both governments, at least on the surface, went to a more moderate stance. Whether that was actually changing any deep institutional behavior, I leave that to your interpretation. I don't know. It's a difficult question.
But it's just when you change the way people sees the enemy on the street, you start to changing the whole process, and it goes up to politics. For 3 weeks in Israel before the election, we run a campaign of printed faces of Iranian people on buses. We crowdfunding this campaign. We ask people to give us some money, and we will put just faces of Iranian saying "We love you" on buses for 3 weeks, while the politicians were running like campaign like for vote for me because I will protect you from the nuclear disaster that is coming. And it was weird, seeing all this advertising for like beware, they're coming, and suddenly you have a smiley face of an Iranian girl saying, by the way, we love you, we have no issue. And it was, but that's how you make a change. People were, okay, so someone is lying here.
I'm a great believer of SMS technology on peace building, and I'm into it. But one of the things that I'm noticing, maybe me or it's only me, is that the younger generation is really shifting towards group texting, kind of Viber, WhatsApp, and things like that, even the messengers. So I see that as an opportunity because it's going to be a group rather than individual SMSs going into a software or whatever. But yeah, that's something that I really wanted to understand. How do you see that? And is there any examples of how that's been used or that could be used or something like that?
One example that comes to mind is a project in Pakistan that uses WhatsApp, and they have politicians that are responding to people's questions over WhatsApp. So I think that it has a lot of potential. There are a lot of people on it. They like to use it because it's free, so you don't have to pay for SMSing, and you can start a group dialogue that way. So I think that that's really great.
Carolina.
Hello, my name is Carolina from UNDP Colombia. So I was wondering if you could, all of you, reflect upon how can second groups, not like the direct people that are interacting through technology, but other groups that hear the people that interact. I'm thinking also in terms of younger generations that access more freely the technology, and the elder people that are more entrenched in this conflictive or polarized conflicts, especially in Colombia. Youth have been really key in terms of generating behavioral change with their groups or families, so it would be nice to know more if you have had any experience measuring these generational challenges.
So, and you're basically talking about the demographics, older versus younger, Carolina, or?
On their circles of influence.
Okay.
I don't know if I explained myself.
So I'll give a 30-second answer, and then I'll let you guys talk in more depth. How many of you know what Facebook's largest demographic is? 50-year-old women. So much to everybody's surprise, it's a grandmother technology. It turns out that the people who use it most of all are grandmothers who want to keep remotely in touch with their grandchildren. You talk to any self-respecting teenager these days who's under the age of 15, they will not be on Facebook. Or if they are on Facebook, it's their fake profile to let their moms think that they're behaving themselves when actually they're misbehaving on Instagram or Snapchat or something else. So yeah, it turns out that some of these demographics are not what we think. I don't know what your comments are.
My grandma is on Facebook. My grandma is on Facebook. My mother, she's on Facebook. They're always commenting and sharing. And I can give you the insight of our pages. The more reach are coming from women 25, 30, 40 years old. That's the biggest chunk of people coming in our pages. And most of the time they will ask other people, I mean their friends, to come to see. And I think that's how it works.
I think, just to add to this, I had to go to school to learn how to use a computer and also how to use the network, the internet, and all this. But my daughter didn't have to go to school. She just somehow learned it by herself. So I think there's a natural tendency that given time, maybe the next generation will just acquire this knowledge naturally. It will be part of a human, what do you call, tendency. Just comes with life. It will be something that just comes with life.
Valerie, just very quickly to wrap us up here and take us home, what kind of demographic differences are you seeing and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, sure. I think regardless of whatever technology you're using, there's always somebody missing from it, and you need to think about ways to address that, whether it's through analog means, newspapers, radio, town criers. Reaching those people will be through other means, and inherently people are missing from those platforms. For example, I've opted out of Facebook, so I'm one of those people that's not on there. And I think as technologies and data explode, there's going to be a new sort of divide. So we have a digital divide, and now we'll also have a data divide, where if you're basing your decisions off of data that you glean from platforms like Facebook, people that aren't on Facebook will be excluded from those decisions. And as you tailor your technology to really focus off of that analytics, you're further excluding those people that aren't on there. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind.
I guess the last comment there is that these technologies always eventually clog up as well. Anything that is effective for increasing more communication will eventually get clogged up precisely because it is effective. So I think we're pretty much done here. Thank you all for your attention, your engagement. If you have questions about specifics of designing technology for behavior change, come talk to any of these smart folks. They've done great work. Thank you very much.